Yes.
How does that impact the proceedings, if at all?
Of course it helps that there are women on that committee, but you know what? I expect the men in this country and the men in this committee, and many of them, believe me, because we all signed on to this letter to demand an FBI investigation, but really, guess who's perpetuating all of these kinds of actions? It's the men in this country, and I just want to say to the men in this country, just shut up and step up. Do the right thing for a change. Okay, you can see I'm a little upset by this, you know, the unfairness of it, but you have a second?
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. Exactly 2 weeks until the midterm elections. The president, he's stoking fears about immigration right now. He says Middle Easterners, his words, Middle Easterners are among the migrants trying to reach the United States through Mexico right now. They're coming up from Central America. What do you think he means by that when he says these Middle Easterners have planted themselves in this caravan?
Well, note that he had no proof of it, and it's just yet another example of how he stokes fear and loathing into the electorate. He knows he's speaking to his base, and the words he uses, he says he doesn't really, you know, he makes up his own definitions. We should stop giving him the benefit of the doubt that he doesn't understand what he means when he refers to nationalists or any of these other terms. These are not just dog whistles, but it's bullhorns. It's racism. It's basically, for many people, it's anti-Semitic. It's white supremacy. He knows very well what he's talking about, even if he professes otherwise.
Well, he says he's proud to call himself a nationalist, even though he says he knows that word hasn't been used in quite a while. He also, at the same time, is railing against what he calls power-hungry globalists who really don't care, he says, about what's good for the United States. What's your reaction to that?
If there's anybody who's power and money hungry, it is the President of the United States, where he just lies every single day. It is very hard to keep up with all of the lies. For example, he says that it's the Republicans who are protecting everyone from being discriminated on pre-existing conditions. Nothing could be further from the truth, because they are right now, the administration right now is in Texas in a huge lawsuit that would do away with protections for people with pre-existing conditions. That's over 50 million people in our country. That is a lie on his part. Also that he is protective of Medicare and Medicaid. No, in fact, his 2019 budget already puts a 1.5 trillion cut to Medicaid. That's going to hurt all of our families. So it is very hard to keep up with all of the lies. But suffice to say that he will say anything to rile up his base so that they will come out and vote for his candidates. And he has put this election, midterm election, as a referendum on him. And I just hope that the people of our country have figured out and connected the dots as to who is protecting people with pre-existing conditions. That would be the Democrats. As to who is protecting the people who are on Medicare and Social Security from the kind of cuts that even McConnell has put out with regard to Medicare, and that would be the Democrats who are protecting our seniors. So I hope that the people in the 2018 elections will have connected the dots and will vote accordingly.
Senator Mazie Hirono is a Democrat from Hawaii and the only immigrant currently serving in the Senate, having come to the U.S. from Japan as a child with her mother and brother. Senator Hirono, we're going to talk about immigration and child separation, but first I want to start with the news of the day, the decision by the Supreme Court on the president's travel ban. You've had some very strong words comparing this to the Korematsu decision allowing Japanese internment. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote in the decision that he said that was wholly inapt to liken that morally repugnant order to this one today. Is he right? Why is that a fair comparison?
Well, I'm not the only one who's making the comparison to Korematsu. In fact, Justice Sotomayor, in her dissent, also likened this decision to the Korematsu case, which was also justified on the basis that it was for national security. And that is what the president is saying regarding his Muslim ban, or at least that's the argument being made, even though during the campaign and even after, he made it very plain. He was very overt about wanting to prevent Muslims from coming to this country. And they cleaned it up in the third iteration or fourth iteration of his Muslim ban, but it's still a Muslim ban. And now the Supreme Court has handed him basically wide powers to do whatever else he wants, just call it national security, and they will not go behind the words of the executive order itself to raise the kind of issues that are present in this case, as noted by the dissents.
Senator, of course, many Republicans say it's not a Muslim ban, but I want to talk to you about the other issue going on right now, and that's on child and family separation. And you have a unique personal perspective on this. Do you mind telling us the story of your younger brother?
Well, when I was brought to this country by my mother when I was about 7, my older brother, who was 9, came with us. And my mother had to leave my younger brother, who was only 3 years old at the time, because she was escaping an abusive marriage and she would be our sole breadwinner. She brought the 2 older kids, us, because we could go to school and there was nobody to take care of my younger brother, who was too young to go to school. So my younger brother never overcame the trauma of that separation, and he would ask my grandparents who raised him during this period every single day, looking at our pictures, when are they coming home? It broke my grandmother's heart, and I still get emotional talking about it now. So I know the trauma that separation creates, and this is what the president did to 2,400 children. And then not too long thereafter, basically he's saying, never mind, as though it makes it all go away. And by the way, there's still chaos as to how this administration is going to reunite all of these children with their parents. It's just unconscionable and cruel. But he takes no responsibility for it, and he continues to blame everybody else, takes no responsibility for it. Barbara, I'm so glad you talked about the CBO study, because don't you often find a case that usually it's the people that don't rely on facts to support their ideological perspectives. Suddenly they find a study, one study among many that seems to support their perspective, and suddenly facts matter. So I'm glad that you brought it up, because most of the studies on raising minimum wage and the impact on the economy shows that we're not going to go to hell in a handbasket. Can I say that? Well, I just did. Okay. Well, and guess what? When I was diagnosed with kidney cancer and facing my first surgery, I heard from so many of my colleagues, including so many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, who wrote me wonderful notes sharing with me their own experience with major illness in their families or with their loved ones. You showed me your care. You showed me your compassion. Where is that tonight? So I can't believe that a single senator in this body has not faced an illness, or whose family member or loved one has not faced illness where they were so grateful that they had health care. I cannot believe that there is a single senator who has not experienced that in their family or their lives. So I know how important health care is. What I don't get is why every single senator does not know that. Why are we here tonight voting on a bill that has not had a single hearing? Why are we here tonight voting on a bill that would eliminate health care coverage that could save lives for 16 million people? Why are we here voting on a bill that will probably mean that people like me, millions in this country, who are now in the ranks of those with pre-existing conditions, will not get the health care we need? Why are we here tonight? Where is your compassion? Where's the care that you showed me when I was diagnosed with my illness?
Misinformed, and I want to show you some video. You had an ICE official, Matthew Albence, who was on the Hill, and he was explaining the laws to Democratic Senator Mazie Hirono. She didn't understand the law. She starts to question him, and he teaches her a lesson. Listen to this.
Law only as deemed so by the president.
They are in those FRCs pending the outcome of that civil immigration process. They have broken the law. They were criminal proceedings when the Border Patrol prosecuted them, but at the conclusion of that process, once the individual came into ICE custody, they would go through administrative proceedings.
John,
I'm confused.
She says she's confused. She was saying that the law is basically Trump's law, which is the no tolerance law, and he's saying, no, they're breaking the law violated under Title VIII of the U.S. Nationality Act. So is that an example of how many of these individuals that want to abolish ICE are misinformed?
Sure, they believe that by being here illegally that people have not committed a crime, that these immigrants are here legally and trying to abide by the law, other than the fact that they're here illegally.
Celebrate the 75th birthday of Social Security. Since Democratic President Franklin Roosevelt signed in 1935, Americans have known that they can rely on Social Security benefits when they retire. Today, over 160,000 Hawaii seniors and millions of seniors in every other state receive monthly Social Security benefits. But Republican leaders in Congress have a new plan to privatize Social Security, balancing the budget on the backs of our seniors. Does this sound familiar? George Bush and congressional Republicans fought to privatize Social Security in 2005. Seniors all across the country rose up in angry protest. If Republicans had succeeded then, seniors would have lost trillions in the stock market meltdown of the Bush recession. Unbelievably, the Republicans still have not given up on their idea to privatize Social Security. You have to ask, what is it that makes them so deaf?
Infamous decision by the Supreme Court back in 1994 that authorized the internment of Japanese Americans during the Second World War. In making that comparison, do you think that is where this could end up? Do you think that the Supreme Court has given this president or any president the power to do something similar with Muslims?
That's my fear. And in fact, the court said under the Immigration and Nationality Act that, Mr. President, you can just do pretty much whatever you want, just so long as you deem it to be in the interest of national security and you don't have overt things like this is a Muslim ban. Although he was so overt about it throughout the campaign, and even after that, he wanted to prevent Muslims from coming to this country. And the court said, we're not going to consider all of that. Whereas, of course, the dissent, a very strong dissent by Justice Sotomayor, said to the contrary, this is very much like the Korematsu decision where the government came in and said the president justified his actions by saying this is for national security. I think it's quite reminiscent. And I say, who's next? Is he going to ban Mexicans from coming to our country? People from Guatemala, people from Honduras? I think the president is feeling pretty powerful right now, and we hardly need to give him more power to our president, who does not limit himself to the rule of law or due process or anything much else that promotes democracy in our country.
Well, let me ask you, because the ruling from the court here, and John Roberts in the opinion, he says, I'll read from it, the proclamation, meaning the travel ban, the proclamation is squarely within the scope of presidential authority. So the argument that the majority on the court was making here was they would take no position on Trump's motivation for it, just saying that he was exercising legitimate presidential authority under the law. Is there a thought on your part in response as a lawmaker to change the law?
Pretty much the court said if you don't like our interpretation of how wide the latitude is to the president under the appropriate act, then you, members of Congress, can change that. As though we have an environment where this Congress is going to do anything positive regarding immigration. So I say this is a dark day for our country, for anybody who cares about checks and balances, because notice that the person who gave the Supreme Court the fifth vote on this was none other than Neil Gorsuch. And if you looked at the tweet that Mitch McConnell sent out, it was of him shaking hands with Neil Gorsuch. So by preventing Merrick Garland from even getting a hearing and putting Neil Gorsuch on the court, that is the fifth vote, not only for this decision, which I think history will deem was an error, but probably another decision that will be come down the pike tomorrow relating to public sector unions. So Neil Gorsuch will probably give the court the fifth vote on that decision also.
But let me just stay on this, though, because I'm trying to understand your interpretation of your view of presidential power as it relates to this case. If we took a future president. It's not Donald Trump. I don't know if it's a Republican. I don't know if it's a Democrat. I don't know anything about this future president. But if a future president asserted that I, as the president, have the power to make a determination that the following 3 or 4 countries have absolutely, unacceptable vetting procedures, and therefore, until those vetting procedures are addressed, I'm not going to allow entries to the United States from those countries. Would that future president, do you think that future president has that power?
The error of this court's decision was that they did not take into consideration the true motives for this iteration of the Muslim ban, and the true motive being a Muslim ban. And so you can code it any way you want. You can try to sugarcoat it, I should say, by saying, well, this is actually for some other reasons. So the court's saying that whatever the president says to justify what he's doing has no impact on their decision at all. So that is a very broad reading of the powers that the president has to do whatever the heck he wants under the rubric of national security. And what I would say that the dissenters looked at, which was the totality of the comments and the statements that can lead one to conclude that the real desire was for a Muslim ban, which should be unconstitutional as being based on religion.